Hey, how's it going? Carlo here from AYCB, and today I'm going to be reviewing Nidavellir. This is a very interesting game that features a lot of familiar mechanics we've seen in other games before, like hidden bidding, card drafting, and set collection, but it executes some of them in some unfamiliar ways we haven't seen before, and also introduces some new mechanics that add sort of another twist to this game to give it its own distinct identity. It packs a lot of punch into a relatively short playtime. I think it's a great game, so stick around and let me tell you in detail what I think about Nidavellir. So what are you actually doing in Nidavellir? Well, the idea is that you're going to be drafting cards from these different taverns. They're going to be dwarves of different classes. So there's 5 different types of dwarf, and they score in different ways. And basically the game's going to play out in a series of rounds where players are using secret bids with their 5 coins at their disposal. At these taverns, we're going to be revealing the bids, and then in order from highest to lowest, players are going to be selecting these dwarves, adding them to their tableaus, and then basically at the end of the game, we're all going to be adding up our points for the different types of dwarves we've collected, as well as any coins we have. In your 5 starting coins, one of these allows you to actually upgrade your coins. So throughout the game, you're going to start with the basic range of coins from 0 to 5, and you actually have something called the Royal Treasure that all players can gain new coins from that go up to a value of 25. So part of this game is building a bit of an engine throughout where you continuously upgrade your coins, which allow you to make higher bids at the taverns, which give you a better pick at the dwarfs that you want for your army. There are a few other rules that come into play along the way, of course, and some little intricacies, but some of these are going to come up as I talk about what actually sets this game apart and what are my favorite things about Nidavellir. So the first thing I want to talk about is heroes. There are these special hero cards that you can recruit. Basically, anytime you complete a set or a line of one of each of the 5 dwarves, then you basically get to recruit a hero for free from the supply. These heroes, there's a couple of each for the different colors, and there's also neutral ones that you can add that have all kinds of interesting abilities. So not only can getting a hero card trigger completing another set or line to gain another hero card, but you can be getting these neutral ones that you stash aside that have abilities that either help you throughout the game or something that happens at the end of the game that you do with that hero. So even though there's a lot in common with some of these games where you're collecting cards of different colors, I mean, you think of games like Seven Wonders, Coloretto, It's a Wonderful World. There's a lot of these either drafting or tableau building kind of games where you're incentivized, and the more the cards that you get of a specific color, the higher number of points. But in Nidavellir, while that still exists, it's also pushing you to, say, diversify, because the more you do, you know, let's say you see that orange card, and if you knew that if you got that 5th or 6th orange card, that would give you a lot of points, but maybe instead taking the green card triggers, you know, the recruitment of a hero, and you might be able to recruit an orange hero that would have given you just as many points as that orange card anyway. So there's all these interesting decisions to make along with this hero system, and having these heroes, which you don't see all of them come into play every game, gives you some good longevity too in terms of some exploration with the game long term. Another thing I really like about this game that kind of sets it apart is the distinctions. So the game plays over 2 ages, and at the halfway point, there's going to basically be an assessment period where the king is going to assess the value of each player's army, and for each of the 5 classes of dwarves, the player with the most ranks in that class is going to gain a distinction. So that's going to be some sort of ability or some effect that's going to help that player going forward. So it feels like there's more weight to this than some of these other games where there are rounds. And again, coming back to Seven Wonders, which I mentioned, where you had the evaluation of military strength on each side, it was a pretty small thing that would come up. In Nidavellir, it really is a big thing. If you have to be kind of the sole leader in that category to get the distinction at the halfway point. So if you're tied, let's say you and another player both have 3 of that color, then no one will actually get the distinction. You have to stand out. So that, along with the heroes and this whole coin upgrading system, which I mentioned before, introduces all these really interesting timing elements so that the decisions feel different throughout the game. And it's not just draft a card and, you know, get the colors to match up. Because of the aspect of the coins, you're trying to decide when can you afford to spend keep your more expensive coins in your pouch to upgrade and get a higher coin, or when do you need to actually be using those to win your bids in the tavern and be able to upgrade your lower coins instead. Or you might actually not be able to afford or justify having that upgrade coin out there because that's a 0 with your bid. So you might actually not upgrade a coin that round if you know you really need specific types of dwarves for your army. And another thing is I love the way the player interaction comes into play in this game, because especially with higher player counts, something I guess I haven't talked about yet really is the player counts. It ranges from 2 to 5. I've played it at every count so far, and it works surprisingly well at every single count, to be honest. I do like it most as a 3 or 4 player game. I find that's kind of the sweet spot. I didn't expect to like it as much with 2, and I actually thought it was really, really good with 2. The only thing with 2 players is that there's just a little less player interaction, and you can get more done. Basically, you get in each other's way a little bit less, I find, and yeah, there's just, because the same amount of heroes and are available for the game regardless of player count, I find that gets more interesting with higher players. But once it gets up to 5, it's maybe a little chaotic. You don't always get what you want, but either way, it works well at all player counts, especially because most of this game plays simultaneously. You're bidding at the same time, and then even when you reveal bids, the only real downtime or when the game can stall is if someone triggers that hero recruitment. Sometimes you're looking through the heroes, or you see, the symbols on them, and you have to look up in the rules what they do. But aside from that, the game runs really quickly, really smoothly, and that player interaction really comes in when you think, because you can see, if you see that a player really is going for, let's say, the minors, the orange cards, you might not need the orange cards because you might be going for green or blue, but you need that one orange card to complete your set. So you're simultaneously taking a card that denies your opponent something they really need, but it is also potentially going to really work for you. So there is a lot of tension. You can never really know what your opponents are going to take when they go to the taverns, which I really like. So by now it's pretty clear that I really like Nidavellir. I like almost everything that it does, but there are a couple things that hold it back, in my opinion, from being, one of my, it's not going to be one of my absolute favorite games or a game that I want to play every single game night, and there's a couple things that keep it from being like a truly top tier game. The first thing that comes to mind has to do with the bidding. There are times where, as I mentioned before, because you often are okay with whatever you get, whether you get something that adds to your most highest priority pile, or you get something that you don't have enough of that triggers a new hero, I often found myself okay with getting last pick at the tavern. So a lot of the time I would just put my 3 cheapest coins as my bids for the taverns and keep my 2 highest ones in the pouch, and I found that I had a pretty good success rate with winning games when I just was okay with getting last or second last pick and just taking what was available. I've heard the expansion Nidavellir apparently adds a little more incentive to actually winning the bids, which addresses that a little bit, but that's just something to keep in mind. I wouldn't say it actually, deters entirely from the game, but there were certain times where after looking at it, I realized that probably doesn't matter where I put these. I might get last or second last pick, but it'll probably work out for me in the end. So that's something to keep an eye out for in the expansion Nidavellir. Another thing to keep in mind is if you're playing with players who are a lot more experienced, a new player might struggle just because of the complexity on some of the heroes or getting a hang of the timing. That one I don't think is really necessarily a criticism of the game, but something to keep in mind. If you're only going to show this to someone maybe once or twice, might not be worth it as kind of like a one-time try it out game. But I see this hitting a really nice sweet spot in a lot of groups where it plays in that 30 to 60 minute range. Even under, when you have people who know the game well, you can probably play it in 20, 30 minutes sometimes at certain player counts. I feel it would work really well too as a gateway or gateway plus kind of game too, either introducing new people to board games or someone who kind of wants that next step above the gateway game that they've kind of introduced themselves to the hobby with. So I feel like this sits above kind of those games like I mentioned, like maybe Seven Wonders or something like Between Two Cities, or a Coloretto, if you want something that has some of those familiar aspects of the drafting and the set collection, but with a little more complexity, a little more going on without really increasing the rules overhead or the time too much, then Nidavellir fits that bill really well. So after about 8 or 9 plays, I still really like Nidavellir. I'm still wanting to get it back to the table. I could see myself maybe after another 5 or 10 plays, maybe 15 plays, kind of feeling like it needs that expansion Nidavellir, but honestly for now, I really don't feel like I need it. I could easily play this another 5 or 10 times just from the base version alone. There is a lot here, a lot of value in such a relatively small game and easy to get into game. And again, I think now it's probably one of my favorite drafting set collection games. I kind of got It's a Wonderful World recently, and I'm wondering now if I made a mistake because I think I already like this more. I think this is going to stay in my collection for a long time. I look forward to playing it many more times. Definitely one of my top 10 games of 2020. Don't know quite where it sits yet. But yeah, I highly recommend you check out Nidavellir. It's on Board Game Arena, so you can go check it out on there. Otherwise, that's it for this review. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.